So our next presenter, Gabriela Mendoza, racialization of minorities in anime and cartoons. Please help me welcome Gabriela.
Hi, my name is Gabriela. Thanks for coming to the Lowell Overton Symposium. So a little bit of the motivation for my study was originally I did this for a class project. And so, in the class project, we were allowed to kind of pick a topic that we wanted to research. And so as an avid anime watcher myself, I kind of chose to analyze the racialization of minorities in anime and cartoons. And there's been research done on analyzing minorities in anime and cartoons separately, but I haven't really seen anything done comparatively. So that's kind of the motivation for my study. So some of the questions that I am trying to answer is, does the lack of diversity of characters in anime and cartoons relate to the way viewers perceive themselves? So since the cast of these anime and cartoons are pretty homogeneous, there's not that many minorities. And so I wanted to see if that had any effect on the viewers. And then another question was, were viewers aware of the subliminal messages conveyed? So oftentimes minorities are portrayed in a more of a subordinate position than their white counterparts. So I wanted to see if viewers were aware of that as well. And to kind of relate this back to sociology, there's a book called The New Jim Crow written by Alexander. And they talk a lot about historically, people of color have been portrayed very negatively by the media. It can be traced back to the when slavery was abolished. Black people back then were portrayed as bestial, less of a human race and dangerous. So to tie it back to sociology, that's why I wanted to answer these questions. So previous literature on cartoons, the undertones of white superiority in the Power Rangers. So the Power Rangers, their leader is a blue Power Ranger. He is white, and he kind of makes all of the orders and everybody else follows suit and almost doesn't question his leadership. People would make like suggestions, like the other Power Rangers would make suggestions, but ultimately they do what he says. And then the black character is a black Power Ranger, and he's portrayed very naive, very clueless on his position in the group. So that was a study done by Cheney. And then for, Roberts. And then for Undertones of White Superiority, again, and Static Shock, a cartoon show back in the early 2000s. And that one, although the main character is black, he is, again, portrayed as a very naive character, very clueless. He has a white sidekick, and the white sidekick is the one that often kind of gives him advice and gives him direction on what to do with his powers in the show. And so then for previous literature on anime, anime originated in Japan, and in order to become more successful, it had to appeal to its Western audience. So since the U.S. has one of the biggest markets for entertainment, Japanese anime had to kind of adapt and make itself marketable. So an example of this is animations drawn in the big eye style. So Japanese anime has a lot of characters that have a big, deep set of eyes, which is found in Disney princesses and like Boo from Monsters Inc., Tangled. So that's not really reflective on animes from their origin. And then also, fans' perception about the anime. Oftentimes, anime creators engage in ethnic bleaching, which is kind of where they strip all of the culture from the anime, and then when it gets out to mainstream, it's kind of just marketable for the Western market. And so why does anime have very few minority characters? Japanese as a country is very homogenous. They don't have a lot of minorities, so that's reflective in their anime as well. And then since they also get their inspiration from the Western market, their minority characters are often portrayed very stereotypically. So for example, this character, he can be perceived as either Native American or black, and he's a very big character, very muscular, and he is kind of naive and clueless on his leadership position. And so for my study, I did 5 interviews. I did all of the interviews with college-age students. I asked questions such as I asked them to pick a character in an anime they were watching and to kind of give me a description of the character in the show and their role. And then again, I asked them to describe a white character and their position in the show. So some of my limitations, I only did 5 interviews, so you can't really generalize the results. And then I attempted to refrain from asking leading questions. So sometimes the interviewees would need clarification, and so then I had to kind of ask the question, which could have been portrayed as a leading question. And then people have different interpretations of the anime they watch, meaning that some people from liberal arts majors might be more analytical of the shows they watch, versus some people from harder science majors like biology or chemistry might be more critical of the shows they watched. And I only did interview minorities, so there wasn't a comparison to their white counterparts. So some of my preliminary findings were that there was a difference in populations. So one of the people that I interviewed, he said that while he wasn't aware of the subliminal messages that were portrayed, his parents were actually very critical of the shows that he watched. So, for example, he would watch Dragon Ball Z, and his parents were very critical of a character in that show and would be like, oh, well, why are you watching this show? You know, they portray people of color negatively. And then a lot of the interviewees were aware of the subliminal messages. Oftentimes, they would just watch these shows for entertainment and didn't really understand or, I guess, care too much to analyze the show actively. And then influence of previous knowledge. Again, some of them were from liberal arts majors, and they analyzed the show much more critically than people from biology majors or harder science majors. And so then for next steps, I would want to compare the older population versus the younger population. So I'd want to compare college students' perceptions and then older people and their perceptions on shows. And then I would want to do more interviews, and something interesting that I would want to do would be I would want to interview white people too, to kind of get the comparison on how they interview people. And that concludes my presentation.
Very interesting, very interesting. Well, all of them are interesting. The first one, the second one, very good. Thank you very much. So once again, questions from the audience. Anything that piqued your interest, you want to make a comment about, or a question? Yes? What were the genders that were participating?
I did 1 male, and then the rest were female. Yeah.
What kind of cartoons did you most enjoy?
The ones that I focused on were the more popular ones, Dragon Ball Z and Naruto, and then Attack on Titan. And then for the cartoons here in the U.S., nobody really watched cartoons. I got somebody that watched Stephen Cooley, I think it was. I don't remember.
So how did you recruit your interview?
Two of them I knew, and then the other 2 referred me to somebody who would be willing to participate.
So did you give them a clue as to the design, or
No,
they were just having fun?
Yeah, I just asked them questions, but once I started to ask them questions, such as like picking a minority character and picking a white character, they kind of like got onto the study that what I was trying to get at. And so I think at the moment they were trying to like realize, oh, like I should be more critical, and some of them might have fed me more information than they let on originally.
Other questions? I always have lots of questions. I always want to make sure the audience will get their questions in. So you mentioned that all 5 were minorities. Did they fit into what might be considered one minority group, or?
2 of them were African American, and then the other 2, one of them was a 2nd generation Hispanic, and the other one was a 1st generation Hispanic as well.
Any other questions? Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Gabrielle.